What would you do if your toddler found a dog with his mouth cruelly taped shut, trembling in the snow, and staring into your child's eyes like he knew her from another life? This is not just a story about rescue. It's a story about destiny, healing, and the unbreakable bond between a child and a dog who had every reason to give up, but didn't. If you believe in second chances, in the power of love to rewrite the darkest chapters, then this story will stay with you long after it ends. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Pawprints Forever. Hit that like button. If you're already feeling the emotion, share this story with someone who needs a little hope today, and comment below to tell us where in the world you're listening from. We love hearing from our global family. Now, let's begin. It started on a quiet, dew-soaked morning in a sleepy rural town tucked away in southern Missouri. The sun had just begun to peek over the horizon, casting a golden hue across fields still heavy with mist. Birds chirped lazily as if even they were reluctant to begin the day. Inside a modest farmhouse painted in fading white, the Blake family was slowly waking up to another ordinary day, except that this day would be anything but ordinary. On the living room rug, surrounded by her plush toys, sat little Clara Blake, barely 18 months old, blonde curls bouncing as she babbled to herself. She was the youngest of 3 kids, the family's light, and often the first one awake. While the rest of the house remained silent, Clara's curiosity had already stirred to life. With the innocence only a toddler could possess, she crawled to the back door, reaching up with chubby fingers to press against the glass. Outside, the family's backyard was enclosed by a worn picket fence that opened out into the woods beyond. It was a peaceful view, one the family had come to cherish. But on this particular morning, something was off. Something caught Clara's wide, curious eyes. Beyond the fence, near the edge of the woods, stood a figure, barely visible in the early light. At first glance, it seemed like a shadow, but then it moved. Clara's small voice squeaked out a garbled sound of excitement. Her hand thumped against the glass, alerting her mother, Elise, who'd just stepped into the kitchen, still half asleep and clutching a steaming mug of coffee. "Elise, what are you looking at, baby girl?" she mumbled, her voice hoarse. Then she saw it. A dog. No, a German shepherd, big and thin, standing still as a statue just beyond the fence. Elise's breath caught in her throat as she moved closer to the door. Something about the dog's posture was wrong. Its mouth, its eyes. It was staring directly at Clara, and its muzzle was wrapped in duct tape. Elise dropped her mug. The ceramic shattered across the linoleum, hot coffee splashing against her legs. But she didn't feel the sting. Her eyes were locked on the animal outside. What in God's name? She scooped Clara into her arms and unlocked the door, stepping barefoot onto the porch. The dog didn't move. It stood as though frozen, only its eyes flickering with the smallest glimmer of hope. Elise, heart pounding, didn't dare call out. She knew better than to startle a hurt animal. But something else caught her attention, the tremble in the dog's legs. It was close to collapsing. And still, it didn't run. Instead, it stared at Clara. Clara squirmed in Elise's arms reaching toward the shepherd. "Doggy!" she exclaimed with childish delight. Elise felt torn. Her instincts screamed to be cautious. This was a large, unknown animal, possibly dangerous. But her heart, like the dog's eyes, pleaded for a different story. No wild animal stood silently like that with duct tape wrapped tight around its muzzle unless something truly awful had happened. With shaking hands, Elise backed slowly into the house, set Clara down, and called for her husband. Ben, get down here now!" He came running, shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide with alarm. "There's a dog outside," Elise said, pointing. "Something's wrong. It's been hurt. Someone taped its mouth shut. Ben!" He looked at Clara like it knew her. Ben didn't question. He grabbed his jacket, boots, and an old pair of scissors from the junk drawer. They both knew time was of the essence. By the time Ben carefully approached the fence, the German shepherd had sunk to its haunches. Its ribs were stark beneath matted fur. The duct tape was tight around its muzzle, cutting into the skin. It didn't flinch as Ben crouched nearby. Instead, it lowered its head. Surrendered, as though it had fought long enough and was simply done. Ben moved slowly, whispering calming words he wasn't even sure the dog could hear. Easy now. It's okay, boy. Or girl. We're not going to hurt you. He reached out. The dog shivered but didn't retreat. With one quick snip, the tape began to loosen, and then came the sound. The faintest whimper, so soft it barely made a mark against the morning air. Not a growl, not a bark, a cry. By the time Elise came outside with a blanket and Clara toddling behind her, the shepherd had collapsed fully onto its side. Its eyes never left Clara, and Clara, small as she was, walked right up to the dog's nose, plopped onto the grass and said softly, "It's okay, doggy. You found us." And that's when the dog, this broken, battered creature, licked Clara's tiny hand. Elise gasped, a lump forming in her throat. Ben looked stunned. They didn't yet know who this dog was, where it came from, or what horrors it had endured. But they knew one thing. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a reunion, and it had only just begun. The emergency vet was over an hour away, and the nearest animal control office had yet to return Elise's frantic voicemail. Ben had tried calling 3 times. Nothing. Typical for a Sunday in the middle of the rural South. Answers were always slow, but today felt especially cruel. The German shepherd lay wrapped in a thick wool blanket, resting on their back porch just beneath the swing. Elise had gently cleaned the worst of the dried blood around its muzzle, where the duct tape had ripped the skin raw. She'd used warm water, cotton pads, and a whisper-light touch. The dog had barely stirred, just a flinch here and there, but never once did it growl or bare its teeth. Its silence wasn't just calm. It was heavy, wounded, wary. Clara had sat beside the shepherd the entire time, babbling softly in her toddler language, her tiny hand resting against the dog's paw like she was holding vigil. Elise crouched beside them now, brushing the shepherd's ears with careful fingers. "He's not just starved," she murmured to Ben, who stood watching from the steps. "He's broken. Look at him. It's like he lost everything." Ben nodded, jaw tight. "Someone did this to him, taped his mouth shut, dumped him out here to die." Elise swallowed hard. And somehow, he found Clara. They both looked down at their daughter, who had just started humming softly, a tune she'd made up probably, but somehow it made the moment even more tender. "We need to call the sheriff," Ben added. "No," Elise said too quickly. Then she softened. "Not yet. You know what'll happen. They'll send someone to take him away, maybe even put him down." Ben sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "And if whoever did this is still around?" Elise shook her head. "He came to us, Ben. He came to Clara. That's not a coincidence." He wanted to argue, wanted to say something logical, but logic had abandoned them the moment a toddler and a tortured German shepherd locked eyes and found something human between them. So instead, Ben nodded once. "All right, we keep him safe. For now." The next few hours were a blur. They brought the dog, whom Clara promptly named Bobo, into the house after he managed to stand and wobble forward on shaking legs. Elise set up a bed made from old couch cushions and their softest fleece blankets near the fireplace. Ben gave him small portions of chicken broth and boiled rice, gentle on the stomach. Bobo lapped it up with dazed gratitude, resting his head after each bite like it took all his strength just to chew. Clara wouldn't leave his side. She napped near him, played quietly by him, and once even laid her own favorite blanket over him, tucking it in like she'd seen her mum do at bedtime. "Clara, sweetie, he needs rest," Elise said, gently trying to pull her away. But Bobo lifted his head weakly, his eyes flicking with a whisper of concern the moment Clara was moved. "Okay," Elise breathed. "Okay, you can stay for now." It was strange. Bobo didn't react that way to Elise or Ben, only to Clara. The girl who couldn't speak in full sentences yet had become his guardian angel. By nightfall, Bobo was resting easier, his breathing more rhythmic. Elise knelt beside him and looked into those tired, intelligent eyes. "Where did you come from, boy?" She didn't expect an answer. But then something happened. Bobo reached out with his paw, slow, deliberate, and pressed it gently against Elise's arm. Then he turned his head toward Clara, now curled up in her baby chair, fast asleep, and whined, not from pain, from longing. Elise blinked, heart pounding. Was he trying to tell her something? Ben noticed too. "You see that?" She nodded slowly. "He knows her. He knew her the second he saw her." "But that's impossible," Ben replied. "She's never been around dogs before." Elise was about to agree, until a memory struck her like a slap. The fair. Last summer. Clara was just 10 months old and they'd visited the farmer's market, which had included a local animal rescue booth. Elise had held Clara up to see a German Shepherd puppy behind a little gate. The puppy had licked her fingers, barked twice, and Clara had laughed for the first time in her life. Could it be the same dog? No, that was crazy, wasn't it? Elise rose slowly, walked to her bookshelf, and pulled out the baby memory photo album. She flipped through the pages, heart racing, until she found it. A photo of Clara in her sun hat. A photo of a small German Shepherd puppy licking her fingers. "Oh my God," she whispered. She ran to the kitchen, flicked the porch light on, and brought the photo back to Bobo. She held it near him. "Is this you?" Bobo sniffed it, paused, and then wagged his tail, weakly, just once, but unmistakable. "Elise," Ben breathed. Elise sank to the floor, hands trembling. He remembered. He remembered her. And that's when the tears came. She didn't even notice Clara had stirred in her chair, sleepy-eyed and holding her blanket. The little girl toddled over, looked at the photo, and then at Bobo. Then she pointed to the dog and said, clear as a bell, "Bobo." The dog's ears perked slightly. She had named him. But maybe she had remembered too. The next morning arrived gently, as if the world itself knew something sacred was resting inside the Blake home. Sunlight spilled through the living room windows, bathing the floor in a golden warmth. Elise stirred first, padding softly into the room with a mug of coffee in one hand and her other arm wrapped around herself. Her eyes fell instantly on the pair curled up near the fireplace, Clara sleeping peacefully, nestled against Bobo's side, one small hand tucked under the dog's thick fur. Bobo lay still, but awake. His gaze met Elise's, calm and alert now. The bruised fog that had filled his eyes the day before was clearing. He blinked once, slowly, and Elise swore it was a gesture of thanks. She knelt beside him, careful not to wake Clara. "You stayed with her all night," she whispered. Bobo didn't move, but Elise noticed his tail shift gently, barely tapping the rug. "I still can't believe it," she said more to herself than to him. "You remembered her after all this time." She reached out and scratched behind his ear. Bobo didn't flinch. Instead, he closed his eyes and let out a quiet, satisfied sigh. Later that morning, Ben drove into town to pick up dog food, antiseptic supplies, and some extra bedding from the local co-op. Elise stayed behind, using the quiet time to give Bobo another gentle cleaning. He had several small scars along his legs and ribs, old wounds from who knew what. Abuse? Dogfights? Starvation? She tried not to think about it. When she touched the spot where the duct tape had torn his muzzle, Bobo winced, but didn't resist. "You're so good," she murmured. "Whatever happened to you? You didn't let it turn, you mean?" Clara came toddling in wearing her favorite yellow dress, dragging her blanket behind her. When she saw Bobo, her face lit up. "Bobo!" she sang, dropping to her knees beside him. Bobo's tail thumped louder now. He was healing. Over the next 3 days, the Blake home transformed. What had once been a temporary refuge became a place of purpose. Ben built a makeshift dog ramp to help Bobo move between the porch and the yard. Elise cooked special meals, boiled chicken, rice, and carrots. adding in puppy vitamins from the vet's recommendation. And Clara. Clara made it her full-time mission to keep Bobo company. She read him picture books, offered him her favorite stuffed bear, and even insisted he wear one of her hair bows, something Bobo patiently tolerated before Elise gently removed it. The bond between them was undeniable. Wherever Clara went, Bobo followed. When she napped, he lay by her crib. When she cried, he pawed at the bedroom door until he was allowed in. And when she laughed, he wagged his tail like it gave him life. But even with all the love surrounding him, Bobo had moments. Moments when he would stare at the front door unmoving. Moments when he'd bolt upright at the sound of a car engine passing on the gravel road. Moments when his body would stiffen with fear Elise couldn't explain. Then one afternoon it happened. Ben had just returned from work, parking his truck out front as usual. Elise was in the kitchen baking, Clara playing with wooden blocks near the fireplace. Bobo lay beside her, his head resting lazily across his paws. And then he stood. Not the slow, careful rising they'd gotten used to. This was fast, alert. His ears pricked. His body went rigid. He turned to the front window and let out a low, trembling growl. Clara paused mid-play. "Bobo?" she said, uncertain. Elise wiped her hands on a towel and hurried into the living room. "What is it, boy?" That's when they heard the knock. A hard, deliberate bang, bang, bang at the front door. Bobo stepped forward and let out a sharp bark, his first since arriving. It was not a bark of excitement, it was warning. Elise's breath hitched. Clara clung to her leg, sensing the change. She moved cautiously to the window and peered outside. A man stood on the porch, late 40s, unshaven, wearing a camo jacket and scuffed boots. His face was sunburned and hard, mouth tight with suspicion. She didn't recognize him, but Bobo clearly did. The dog was growling now, lips curled ever so slightly, still not vicious but ready, protective. Elise cracked the door slightly, heart pounding. "Can I help you?" The man tilted his head. His voice was slow and rough. "I heard y'all might have found a stray dog out this way, big shepherd, black and tan." Elise's pulse spiked. "Why do you ask?" He narrowed his eyes. "He's mine." Behind her, Bobo barked again, louder now. He pressed his body protectively between Elise and Clara. The man squinted past Elise and caught sight of the dog. "There he is," he said with a smirk. "Stupid mutt. Didn't expect him to survive." Elise's blood went cold. "You did that to him?" she whispered. The man shrugged. "Didn't beat him or nothing, just tried to shut him up. He barked too much, wouldn't fight when I needed him to, waste of time." Elise's fingers tightened on the doorknob. "He's not your dog anymore," she said, voice trembling with rage. The man took a step forward. "Lady, I don't think you understand." But that was as far as he got. Because Bobo lunged, not at the man, but forward, past Elise, placing himself fully between Clara and the door, and he roared, not a bark, not a growl, a full-throated primal snarl that made the man stagger back. Elise slammed the door shut. Ben appeared moments later, tool still in hand, face flushed. "What's going on?" "Call the sheriff," Elise said through clenched teeth. "Now." Ben's voice was low and tight as he spoke to the county sheriff on the phone, standing at the edge of the porch while Elise kept watch from the window. Clara clutched her mother's hand inside, wide-eyed and unusually quiet. And Bobo? Bobo had returned to his position in front of the door, lying down, but still alert, head lifted, ears perked. Guarding. The man had walked off after Elise slammed the door in his face, but not before tossing a final glance over his shoulder, a look that wasn't fear, but challenge. He hadn't expected resistance. He hadn't expected a dog once tortured into silence to find his voice again, and he certainly hadn't expected that voice to come roaring back for someone else. Clara. When Ben came back inside, his jaw was tight. "Sheriff's sending someone. Might be a couple of hours. They're covering a domestic out in Elk Grove." Elise nodded, her arms still wrapped protectively around Clara. "We're not letting that man near this house again, or Bobo." Ben crouched in front of the dog and scratched gently beneath his chin. "You hear that, boy? You're not going anywhere." Bobo leaned into the touch. An hour later, Deputy Lane, a burly man with soft eyes and a deep voice, arrived in his patrol SUV. He listened carefully as Elise recounted what happened, how they'd found Bobo, the state he was in, the man who came to the door claiming ownership. Lane nodded slowly, scribbling notes. The guy matches a description of a repeat offender. Name's Marlin Kemp. He's been in and out of trouble for years. Animal neglect, unlicensed breeding, and worse. Got his property raided once, but somehow walked away with a slap on the wrist. Elise's stomach turned. He said he used Bobo for fighting, or tried to. Lane glanced at the dog, now lying calmly with his head resting on Clara's lap. Doesn't look like a fighter to me. He's not, Elise said softly. He's a protector. Lane jotted down a few more notes, then added, If you're willing to keep him for a while, I can report him as a found stray under protective custody. Gives us time to file cruelty reports, maybe even get a court order for permanent rehoming. But you'll need to be ready in case Kemp pushes back. Ben spoke before Elise could. We're ready. Clara looked up. Bobo stays. Lane smiled. I'll file the paperwork. In the days that followed, life at the Blake home settled into a new kind of rhythm. The news about Kemp being under investigation put Elise and Ben slightly on edge, but with Deputy Lane regularly checking in, they felt safer. And Bobo, he was changing. He began to eat more. His limp faded and strength returned to his legs. His tail wagged more often, sometimes even in his sleep. But the most remarkable change wasn't physical, it was emotional. Each day he became more expressive, more alive. He'd bring Clara her stuffed toys when she cried. He'd curl up beside her crib and whine softly when she had nightmares. He'd run to the window when Ben's truck came home, tail wagging like he was welcoming a long-lost brother. One morning, as Elise folded laundry in the living room, she heard Clara's delighted squeal. "Mommy, Bobo played." She turned and saw it. Bobo, crouched low in a playful stance, tail wagging wildly, nudging a rubber ball toward Clara with his nose. Clara clapped her hands and tossed it back. Bobo leapt to catch it, landing in a gangly mess of limbs but utterly joyful. It was the first time Elise had seen him behave like a puppy. And she wept. That night, after the house had gone quiet, Elise sat by the fireplace watching Bobo sleep. Clara's blanket was draped over him again. A gift, one he never rejected. Ben sat beside her, holding a warm mug in his hands. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if we hadn't opened that door," he said. "I know," Elise replied, "or if Clara hadn't seen him first. She saved him." "No," Elise said softly. "They saved each other." Ben didn't speak for a moment. Then he glanced over at the pair sleeping by the fire. "What happens if Kemp comes back with legal documents? What if the court doesn't care about the abuse?" Elise clenched her jaw. "Then we fight." Ben nodded, then added, "You know we can't let him go back there, no matter what." "I know." They sat in silence, listening to the gentle crackle of the fire. Bobo's breathing was slow and peaceful. Elise reached down and ran her fingers through his fur. "You're home now," she whispered. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, but inside, the home was warm, safe, whole, for now. The sun broke through a patchy sky the next morning, sending streaks of gold across the frost-covered pasture beyond the Blake family's home. There was a crisp bite in the air, a reminder that winter was creeping ever closer. But inside the house, it was warm with the scent of cinnamon pancakes and the sound of Clara giggling as Bobo chased her slowly around the living room. His steps were still careful, residual pain from old wounds clinging to his stride, but his spirit had soared since his arrival. His eyes no longer held that haunted, empty look. Now they sparkled with something Elise hadn't expected to see so soon. Trust, hope, even joy. Elise stood at the stove, watching them from the corner of her eye. Clara squealed as Bobo gently bumped her with his nose, sending her into a fit of delighted laughter. She tripped on the rug and fell backward with a soft, oof. But before Elise could even move, Bobo was there, sniffing her cheek, nudging her gently to make sure she was all right. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck. "It's okay, Bobo. I'm tough." Elise smiled, heart full, but the moment shattered when her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a call from Deputy Lane. She answered quickly. "Morning, Lane." His voice was tight. "Elise, I wanted to give you a heads up. Kemp filed a claim at the courthouse this morning. He's trying to reclaim ownership of the dog." Her stomach dropped. "He can't. You've seen Bobo. You know what he did." "We're compiling the cruelty reports now," Lane said, trying to be reassuring. "But until a judge signs off, it's a legal grey area. If he comes to your property again, call me immediately. Don't engage." Elise's jaw clenched. "He's not getting this dog back." Lane sighed. "I'm with you, but we have to follow the process." As she hung up, Ben entered the room, already sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" Elise didn't sugarcoat it. "He's fighting for custody, legally." Ben cursed under his breath and looked at Bobo, who had now returned to his favorite spot by the fireplace, head in Clara's lap, eyes half closed. "They're not going to win this," Ben said. "No," Elise agreed, staring at her daughter and the dog curled beside her. "Not if I have anything to say about it." The next few days were tense. Lane stayed in regular contact, updating them on the legal proceedings and the mounting list of violations in Kemp's record. But despite the evidence, Elise knew the system could still fail them. She wasn't about to leave it to chance. She reached out to the local animal welfare group, Hope Haven Rescue. A friend from high school worked there now, and within hours of hearing the story, they sent a volunteer to photograph Bobo's injuries and document his behavior. "He's attached to your daughter," the volunteer noted as she snapped photos. "I've seen dogs imprint before, but this is something else. It's like he sees her as his reason to live." "He came to her," Elise said, voice soft but certain. "Not us, not the house, her." The rescue group promised to testify if needed and even offered to help fund legal counsel. The Blakes declined the money, but the support lit a fire in Elise's chest. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them one. 2 nights later, Elise was tucking Clara into bed when she noticed Bobo standing at the window, ears perked, posture tense. She moved quietly to his side. "What is it, boy?" He didn't growl this time. He whimpered. Elise followed his gaze. A car, headlights off, parked at the end of their long driveway near the tree line. She felt a chill crawl up her spine. Ben came into the room moments later, and Elise pointed silently toward the window. He cursed, grabbing the shotgun from the hall closet, not to use but to hold. A clear warning if needed. He stepped onto the porch and stood tall, making sure the person in the vehicle saw him. The car didn't move. For several long minutes, the two sides watched each other across the field of shadows. Then slowly the car reversed and vanished into the night. Ben didn't go back inside right away. He stood there for a long while, listening. The silence was heavy. The next morning, Deputy Lane confirmed it was Kemp's vehicle. "He's trying to intimidate you." "Don't give him what he wants," Lane advised. Elise was already resolved. "We won't." That night, after Clara was tucked in and the doors double-locked, Elise sat beside Bobo in the living room. "You're not going anywhere," she said softly, resting her hand on his back. Bobo shifted closer. "You've got a family now. We'll fight for you." As if in answer, Bobo rested his head on her knee, and Elise knew no matter what Kemp tried next, he would never break what had been built here. This wasn't just about a rescue anymore. This was about belonging, and Bobo had found his way home. 2 weeks passed. The trees had begun to shed their final leaves, painting the Blake family's property in shades of gold and rust. Autumn was slipping into early winter, and every morning brought a layer of frost on the porch rails, but inside the house it remained warm, pulsing with the quiet rhythm of family life. Clara's laughter, Bobo's steady breath, the crackle of the fire, and a steady undercurrent of tension. The legal case had officially begun. Kemp had filed a formal motion demanding the return of his property, a phrase that made Elise's skin crawl every time she heard it. Deputy Lane assured them they were building a strong case, and the animal rescue group had come through with witness statements, medical records, and photo evidence of Bobo's condition when he arrived. Still, Elise couldn't sleep. Not when she knew the decision was going to come down to a courtroom, to a stranger in a robe who had never seen the way Bobo tucked Clara in at night with his nose, who had never witnessed the way his ears perked when she giggled or how he whimpered if she cried. How could someone who didn't know decide if this dog belonged with them? One evening, while Ben made dinner and Clara painted at the kitchen table, Elise sat on the porch steps with Bobo. The stars were just beginning to peek through the dusk, and the air was laced with the scent of wood smoke and pine. "You know," she said quietly, scratching behind his ears, "you've done more healing in this house than you probably know. You came here hurt and afraid, and you gave us something we didn't even know we needed." Bobo looked up at her, ears tilted forward. "You gave my daughter a protector," she continued, her voice catching, "and you gave me a reason to fight like hell." Bobo let out a soft huff and rested his head on her lap. The following week brought a surprise, a letter from the courthouse. Elise's hands trembled as she opened it. Ben stood behind her, one arm wrapped around her waist. They read the notice together. "A court date has been set. Petition hearing, Wednesday, 9 a.m. Ben looked at her. "We're ready." Elise wasn't sure she believed it, but she nodded anyway. On the morning of the hearing, they left Clara with Ben's sister and drove an hour into town with Bobo in the back seat of their SUV. He sat tall, almost regal, gazing out the window with silent focus. Elise kept one hand on his back the entire ride. She could feel his tension, but also something else, like he knew. They arrived at the small county courthouse just as the wind picked up, pulling at Elise's scarf. A few reporters lingered near the steps. Hope Haven Rescue had shared the story online, and it had spread like wildfire. Bobo was quickly becoming something more than just a dog. He was a symbol. A quiet crowd had formed on the sidewalk. Some held signs. Justice for Bobo. Not property. Family. Protect the voiceless. Elise fought tears. Inside, the hearing was held in a modest room that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Kemp sat across the aisle from them, arms crossed, smirking as if the outcome were already decided. But Bobo didn't look at him. Not once. Instead, he leaned his head against Elise's knee. The judge, a greying woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a stern voice, called the room to order. Over the next 45 minutes, the story unfolded. The discovery of Bobo, the condition he was found in, the documented neglect, the testimony of the animal rescue staff. Even a short video Elise had captured. Clara sleeping with her arms wrapped around Bobo's neck, the dog's eyes closed in peaceful trust. Then, finally, came Elise's voice. "He's not just a dog," she told the courtroom. "He's not property. He's part of our family. He came to us starving, broken, scared, but he still trusted my baby girl. He chose her, not out of instinct, not out of survival, but out of something we can't explain." The room was silent. Even Kemp didn't scoff. The judge looked down at the papers, her brow furrowed in thought. Then she turned her gaze toward Bobo, who sat calmly at Elise's side, watching her without fear. Her gavel came down. "I hereby deny the claimant's request for property retrieval. Custody of the animal identified as Bobo will remain with the Blake family under permanent adoption. Case closed." Elise burst into tears. Ben exhaled the breath he'd been holding for weeks, and Bobo, sensing the release of tension in his humans, let out a soft, triumphant bark. They'd won. He was home. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in gentle applause as the family emerged. Elise knelt and wrapped her arms around Bobo. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." And as if to answer, Bobo turned and looked toward the distance, toward the field, the road, and whatever pieces of the past had once hurt him. Then he looked back at Clara's painted rock she'd left in the car. He stepped forward and wagged his tail. The weeks that followed the court ruling were among the happiest the Blake family could remember. The farmhouse, already cozy and full of love, now pulsed with something deeper, a sense of completion. Bobo had not only been rescued, he had been restored, and in return he had anchored himself into their lives like he had always belonged. The story of his rescue had spread further than anyone expected. A local news station came to the house and interviewed the family in front of their big bay window. Clara sat proudly beside Bobo, explaining in her sweet, barely there toddler voice how she had found him. "He was sad," she said solemnly, resting her head against his shoulder. "But I gave him love. Now he's happy." The reporter wiped her eyes. Elise didn't even try to stop her tears. With Bobo's legal status finally secure, the Blakes did everything they could to make him feel like a true part of the family. They took him to the best vet in the region, thanks to donations the rescue group had helped organize. He was treated for old injuries, received updated vaccinations, and underwent a full wellness evaluation. The vet was amazed by his recovery. "He shouldn't be this well-adjusted after everything he's been through," she told Elise. "Whatever trauma he suffered, he's healing in a way I rarely see in dogs with a background like his." Elise simply smiled. "That's because he's not healing alone." One afternoon, Ben installed a special nameplate above the fireplace, a handmade wooden sign that read, "Bobo's Place, loyal, brave, loved." That evening, the whole family sat on the floor in front of the fire, a new tradition forming. Clara had her warm milk. Elise and Ben each held mugs of cider. Bobo rested his chin on Clara's knee, eyes half closed. Ben leaned over and whispered, "Think he knows he's safe?" Elise looked at the way Bobo's body had finally lost its constant tension, the way he breathed deeply when he slept, the way he stayed close, but not from fear. "I think he feels it," she replied, "and I think that's even better." As the seasons changed and snow began to drift across the pasture, Clara and Bobo became nearly inseparable. Clara built snowmen. Bobo knocked them over with his nose. Clara flopped onto the ground in her puffy snowsuit to make snow angels. Bobo plopped down beside her and tried to mimic the motion, wriggling his body into the snow in a way that made them all laugh until they cried. One quiet morning, as frost clung to the windows and Clara colored at the table, Elise watched as Bobo sat beside her, tail sweeping the floor slowly. His eyes tracked every motion of the crayon. Occasionally he nudged one closer when it rolled too far. She captured the moment with her phone, posting it with the caption, "From abandoned to adored, this is what love does." Within hours, the photo had gone viral. A few days later, they received a package in the mail. It was from a retired military canine handler in Texas who had seen their story. Inside was a heavy-duty leather collar with hand-stamped lettering. "Bobo rescued by love, protected by purpose." There was also a note. "I trained dogs for 20 years, and I've seen the best of them. What you have is one of the rarest, a dog who loves with everything he has because someone gave him a reason to. Thank you for fighting for him. He'll fight for you forever." Elise read the note aloud, tears falling freely. Ben fastened the collar around Bobo's neck. Clara stood on her toes to kiss his cheek. "You're my hero," she whispered. But even as the days grew longer and the peace settled in, the family began to notice something strange about Bobo. A habit. At first, they thought it was coincidence. Every night, without fail, Bobo would leave Clara's side after she fell asleep and walk to the back door. He'd sit there sometimes for hours, staring out into the dark pasture, watching, waiting. For what, they didn't know. Elise brought it up one night. "Do you think he's waiting for someone?" Ben frowned. "You mean like a person? Or a dog?" Elise whispered. "A sibling, a friend, another from that awful place." The idea left a hollow ache in her chest. Bobo had found his way home, but maybe not everyone had made it. Maybe part of him still wondered, still hoped. Winter deepened its grip on Missouri. Ice clung to the bare branches, and morning chores now included de-icing the chicken coop and layering the fireplace with extra logs. But despite the chill, the Blake household remained warm, with the same quiet love that had taken root ever since Bobo arrived. Bobo had adjusted fully to family life. He understood the routine now. The rustle of Clara's blankets meant it was time to rise. The clang of Ben's boots on the porch meant breakfast was coming, and the hum of Elise's humming in the kitchen meant the day would be calm and safe. And yet, he still visited the back door each night. At first, Elise and Ben had chalked it up to a dog's habit, maybe just instinct. But now it felt deliberate. He'd sit there with purpose, tail still, ears alert. He wasn't just watching. He was waiting. Clara noticed too. One night, as snow began falling in silent flakes outside, Clara toddled up beside him and placed her small hand on his head. "Are you waiting for your friend?" she asked, her voice as soft as the snowfall. Bobo didn't move, but Elise, who had overheard from the hallway, felt a chill run deeper than the cold outside. The next morning, she called Deputy Lane. "I have a strange question," she said. "Do we know if any other dogs were recovered from Kemp's property when they raided it?" Lane hesitated. "Not officially. There were signs more dogs had been there, scratch marks, old collars, a pile of bones we think came from livestock or worse. But Kemp never admitted to having more. Said Bobo was the only one left." "What if another one escaped?" Elise asked, "or got dumped, like he was?" Lane was quiet for a moment, then, "I'll ask around. But if there's another dog out there, it won't survive long in this weather, unless it's already dead or still searching for someone," Elise finished. That night, Elise found Bobo by the back door again. She sat beside him, her hand running gently down his back. "You waiting for someone?" she whispered. He didn't look at her, just kept staring out into the field beyond the tree line. And then he stood, not slowly, not lazily, but with sharp intent. His ears pricked and a low whine escaped his throat. Elise stood too, peered through the dark. Nothing. Then she saw it. A flicker. A shape. Small. Unsteady. Something was stumbling through the trees at the far edge of the pasture. Elise's heart surged. She flung the door open and called out to Ben, "Get the flashlight! Something's out there!" Ben came running, pulling on his jacket as Bobo bolted out into the snow, bounding through the drifts with renewed purpose. Elise grabbed a blanket and followed, her boots crunching in the icy crust. Bobo reached the shape first. Elise caught up a moment later and gasped. It was a dog, a young one, collapsed in the snow, black and white, skinny as a shadow, its fur crusted with ice and blood. Its eyes barely opened as Bobo approached. He sniffed the pup gently, then licked its muzzle. The pup whimpered, weak, soft, but alive. "Oh, God," Elise murmured. "It found us." Ben arrived seconds later, flashlight beam falling across the pitiful form. Without hesitation, Elise wrapped the blanket around the pup and scooped it into her arms. It didn't resist. Couldn't. It was too far gone. But as she turned back toward the house, she saw Bobo walking beside her, close, protective, like he'd known it was coming, like he'd called it. Inside the house, they set the pup near the fire. Elise fed it small spoonfuls of warm broth while Ben phoned the vet, explaining the emergency. Clara knelt nearby, watching with solemn awe. Bobo lay beside the pup, his nose pressed against its shoulder. And when the pup finally stirred, lifting its head weakly, it didn't look at humans. It looked at Bobo, and wagged its tail, just once. A recognition, a flicker of reunion. Tears streamed down Elise's cheeks. "You waited for him," she whispered, stroking Bobo's head. "You knew he was out there, didn't you?" Bobo didn't respond. He just rested his head on his friend's side, and stayed there, all night. The little pup survived the night, though barely. Elise spent hours spooning broth into its mouth drop by drop. The poor thing, later confirmed to be a male, had gashes along his side and signs of frostbite on his ears and paws. His ribs jutted out sharply beneath his patchy fur. The vet who arrived in the morning, Dr. Hadley, a calm woman in her 40s with frost in her eyelashes, gave the pup an emergency injection of fluids and antibiotics. "He's lucky," she said after examining him, "but not by much. A few more hours out there and he wouldn't have made it." Bobo had refused to leave the pup's side. When Dr. Hadley knelt to examine the young dog, Bobo stayed pressed close, letting out soft whines and occasionally licking the pup's muzzle as if reassuring him. Clara, too, remained close. She sat beside the blankets, eyes wide, whispering to the little dog. "You're safe now. Bobo brought you home." Dr. Hadley studied Bobo for a long moment. "It's like he knew," she said softly. "Dogs have incredible senses, but this is more than that. He felt this little one out there. That's remarkable." Elise nodded, still shaken by the night's events. "He's been watching that tree line every night for weeks, waiting. I thought it was just habit. Now I wonder if he never stopped believing." The pup whimpered and tried to rise, but his legs gave out beneath him. Elise gently steadied him, tucking the blanket closer. "We'll help him, just like we helped you." Clara looked up and beamed. "Can we name him?" Elise smiled. "What do you think his name should be?" The little girl thought for a moment, tapping her chin dramatically. Then she nodded with certainty. "Buddy." Bobo wagged his tail once, as if approving. In the days that followed, Buddy slowly began to recover. He couldn't walk far at first, just a few steps at a time, but his appetite returned, and with it a spark in his eyes. He followed Bobo everywhere, hobbling like a shadow, still learning how to move in the world. At night, they slept side by side in front of the fireplace. Bobo had become his guardian now. The roles had shifted. Clara, ever the doting sister, tried to include Buddy in her games, reading him picture books and showing him how to stack blocks. Elise captured a photo of the moment Buddy laid his head on Clara's foot, tail wagging slowly as she covered him with one of her doll blankets. The image, Buddy and Clara, framed by Bobo lying watchfully beside them, went viral again. News outlets picked up the story of not just one dog's rescue, but the reunion of two lost souls who had once endured the same horrors. More donations came in for the animal rescue group. People wrote letters, some sent care packages, treats, collars and toys, but none of it meant as much as the change Elise saw happening in Buddy. He began to trust. He began to play. And most of all, he began to smile. That day came 2 weeks after his arrival. Clara had thrown a toy mouse into the yard, and Buddy, still limping slightly, had chased after it, snatching it up with a clumsy leap and turning to look back at her, tongue out, tail wagging, eyes alive. Elise gasped and grabbed the camera. She snapped the photo and whispered, "There you are, Buddy. We've been waiting for you." That evening the family sat around the fire again, another tradition forming like rings in a tree. Buddy and Bobo lay curled together on the rug. Clara leaned against Elise's lap, humming her nonsense bedtime song. Ben glanced over from his armchair. "You realize we're now officially a two-dog family?" Elise laughed. "We were the second Bobo walked through that gate." He nodded. "It's like fate, you know, like they were meant to find us." "I think we were meant to find each other," Elise replied. She looked down at the dogs sleeping side by side. They survived something terrible, and yet somehow they came out of it not bitter, but better. Ben reached over and took her hand, because someone showed them kindness when it mattered most. Clara yawned. "They're family now." Elise smiled. "Yes, baby, they are." And in that quiet moment, with the fire flickering, the wind whispering outside, and Love sleeping peacefully on the rug, there was no doubt left. The past couldn't hurt them anymore. They were home, all of them. Spring came like a promise, soft rains washing the last of the snow away, buds blooming along the fence line, and warmth finally returning to the earth. The fields beyond the Blake farmhouse turned a fresh, impossible green, stretching into the horizon like the world had pressed a reset button. And with the season came a new rhythm to life. Clara had grown a little taller. Her words came clearer now, her questions more curious. She talked about Bobo and Buddy like they were her brothers, not dogs. explaining to strangers at the co-op how Bobo saved my heart and Buddy is learning how to dream again. Bobo had transformed into a picture of quiet strength, muscles restored, fur thick and glossy, eyes wise and deeply kind. He still stayed close to Clara, walking her to the school bus at the end of their gravel road every morning and waiting by the mailbox until she returned. Buddy, on the other hand, had blossomed into a lively, goofy, fiercely loyal pup. His limp remained, but didn't stop him from racing Bobo through the field or tackling Ben in a blur of paws and tail wags. He adored Clara, but looked to Bobo in everything, as if trying to become the dog his big brother had taught him to be. The pain of their past was still there, etched in their scars, in the way they sometimes flinched at sharp noises, but it no longer defined them. Love had overwritten those chapters, and the story had become theirs now. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in streaks of pink and gold, the family gathered for dinner on the porch. Clara munched on corn on the cob while Bobo sat at her feet and Buddy leaned against her side. Elise leaned into Ben's shoulder, her heart full. "I never thought we'd be here," she whispered. "Me neither," he replied, "but I can't imagine life without them." They sat in silence, watching the dogs play in the soft light. Then Clara spoke, quietly, but with a certainty that made both parents pause. "They waited for us," she said, "and we found them. That's what forever means." Elise felt her throat tighten. Ben rubbed his eyes with a smile. The truth of it hit hard, because she was right. Forever wasn't about how things started. It was about what you chose every day after. And they had chosen each other. Later that night, as the stars blinked into the sky one by one, Elise tucked Clara into bed. The little girl looked up sleepily and whispered, "Will they stay with us forever?" Elise kissed her forehead. "As long as we live, and maybe longer." Clara nodded once, satisfied. "Good." Outside the bedroom door, Bobo and Buddy lay curled together, guarding the night as they always did. Elise passed them and paused. She knelt down, pressing her forehead gently to Bobo's. "Thank you for coming to us," she whispered. Then to Buddy, running her fingers through his soft fur. "Thank you for holding on long enough to find us." They didn't move, but their eyes followed her with understanding. They had found their family, and the family had found them. Not through chance, not through luck, but through something deeper, something stronger. Love. And love. When it's real, when it's fought for, when it's earned, never lets go, not in this life. Not in the next. Because here, in this house full of pawprints, laughter and second chances, forever had already begun. From a frostbitten stranger to a family's greatest gift, Bobo's journey reminds us that no matter how broken the beginning, the ending can still be beautiful. Buddy's arrival proved that love doesn't run out, it only multiplies. And Clara, she didn't just rescue a dog, she became the heart of a new forever. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button, subscribe to Pawprints Forever for more unforgettable stories just like this, and share it with someone who still believes in miracles. We'd love to know what part of this story moved you the most. Leave a comment below, and don't forget to tell us where you're listening from around the world. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, some pawprints never fade.